So, it's Silver's turn now. When it comes to the list of polarizing characters in the franchise, Silver is often near the top. I found that you either love the character, or you absolutely despise him, and there's rarely an in-between. And I think a big reason why he can be so heavily disliked is because of the game he debuted in, that being the critically acclaimed Sonic 06. I mean, the memes speak for themselves and pretty much all stem from a single boss fight.
It's no use! It's no use! It's no use! It's no use! It's no use!
It's no use! It's no fucking use!
Now, let's get back on track. I'll admit that whilst I never really liked his character when I was younger, I've grown to really enjoy it, and he's now one of my favorites in the series with a pretty compelling character arc depicted in Sonic 06. I think that he is heavily underrated and is often misjudged just because of the game that he was introduced in. And you know what? I like Sonic 06. But that'll be a video for another time because honestly I could sit down for hours explaining why this game is actually pretty good despite its flaws. Moving past 06 though, that's where things start to get a bit shaky with the character, but as always, I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. Let's start from the beginning by breaking down his story and character in Sonic 06 and work our way up from there. But before we begin, I just want to say that I do have a Patreon, so if you want to go the extra mile in supporting this channel, then that is the best way to do it, especially since another one of my videos was demonetized. Thank you, YouTube. Link to that is in the description as always, and I thank you guys for the support. Now back to the video. Silver has many traits and characteristics, as well as a pretty compelling arc that was shown in Sonic 06, all with a great setup and reasoning. One of his traits is his optimism. Silver is the definition of the glass half full kind of guy, and this is seen throughout his campaign, and I think the best way to display his characteristics is to break down key moments in his story and link them to his characterization. Silver hails from the future, which is not a futuristic haven, but instead a fiery hellhole on par with Peckham. He is seen flying through this world that has been devastated by a creature known as Iblis, a being of fire that is immortal. Throughout his entire life, Silver has only known this world. This way of life, a world with no hope. He was born in it. Whenever he questions how this future came to be, he cannot get a direct answer. But even still, he continues to fight. Many would have given up by this point, and that would be expected, but Silver can see the light at the end of the tunnel. He wants nothing more than for a good future and will fight for that with his life on the line, hence optimism, and you're gonna hear that word a lot. Another one of Silver's traits is his openness with emotion, more so how his emotions are always on display without really restraining them. This can be seen when Silver takes down Iblis. He's understandably frustrated because it's an endless cycle. No matter how many times he beats down Iblis, it will just rise up again, ensuring the future will always remain as it is. And just when Silver's emotions are running at their highest, Mephiles enters the scene to capitalize on them. Mephiles explains that everything, including Iblis, has an origin, and so Silver must kill the one responsible for releasing Iblis, aptly named the Iblis Trigger. Silver agrees to go through with this plan, and this is a point of contention with the character that I honestly never understood. Many criticize Silver for going along with Mephiles, but can you blame him? Silver is trapped in an endless battle with an immortal being that sees no positive outcome. There is no viable way to defeat Iblis and no way of there being a good future. Those plot points have been clearly set up. Silver is pretty damn desperate at this point, and for the first time in his life, he's getting some answers, some solution to the problem. For the first time, there's hope for a good future. Plus, Silver is quite naive, and you have to remember that he is still pretty young, so that, mixed in with his optimism, leads to a pretty solid reason as to why he follows through with the plan. And this situation may feel a bit similar to Knuckles in Sonic 3, with how Robotnik took advantage of his naive nature to trick him into fighting Sonic so that he could swipe the Master Emerald for himself. And this won't be the end of the parallels that can be drawn between the two characters. I also know that when glancing over the character here, many are inclined to think of Trunks from Dragon Ball, and I don't blame you, considering that in the official character documents for the game it says specifically to think of Trunks, showing that the character was in fact inspired by him. But that doesn't make him a clone of the character, which you'll see as we go through this analysis. When Silver travels to the past, he immediately notices that he and Blaze are separated and shouts for her in a seemingly distressed manner. Whilst this is most likely done to ensure her safety, I believe that there's something a little deeper here with Silver's immediate reaction. It's because Silver is on his own, something that we see he's not fully comfortable with, at least not yet. In this story, Blaze acts as sort of a mentor figure to Silver, kinda like a big sister, and he turns to her on occasion for advice, and so to be separated would be distressing for Silver. Hell, Blaze even outright states that Silver gets pretty insecure when he's on his own. This will be displayed heavily at the end of Silver's campaign, but I'll talk about that when I get there. He does spot Sonic at one point, but before he can go and kill him, he's jumped by Amy Rose, who apparently needs to get a prescription checked because she somehow mistakes Silver for Sonic. How the hell did that happen? Anyways, Silver then tags along with Amy, who's looking for Sonic, and they team up, with Silver unaware that Sonic is the name of the Iblis trigger. And I like how, even though Silver is on a quest to save the entire future, he still makes time to help Amy, showing that above everything, he is a very kind-hearted person. I also enjoy how he comments on how serene and beautiful the desert is with people that live in peace and harmony. Even earlier in the story, he's stunned by the Soliana forest's beauty, and both of these comments don't come completely out of nowhere. They serve as a stark contrast to his bleak and depressing future, and whilst you may think that this would make him not want to go off causing disruptions and murdering a man, it just emboldens his want to complete his task, as this is the future that he dreams of and wants to fight for. This, once again, ties back to his optimism, especially thanks to him now having a task to complete that will get him one step closer to his goal. He does eventually find Sonic and smacks him around until he questions all of his life decisions.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine.
With Sonic laying helpless, the victory is all but secured. That is, until Amy steps in. Amy acts as a shield aiding Sonic's escape, and this scene is actually a great setup for progressing Silver's character. Silver cannot bring himself to hurt Amy to get to Sonic, which plays into the nature of his character very well. He doesn't want to hurt people, he doesn't relish in it, he just wants to complete his mission so that the future can be saved. He isn't a bad person, he's just on the wrong path. In explaining his motives to Amy, she uses her talk no jutsu on Silver and explains that Sonic would never do anything to destroy the world, and that even if there was a chance of that, she would still choose Sonic. We can see through Silver's body language with how he reacts to this that Amy's words have gotten to him, which leads into one of the best cutscenes for Silver's character in this game. We see him sitting alone in complete silence by the beach until Blaze finds him. She can immediately tell that something is wrong with him and asks, to which Silver replies with this.
To kill someone to save the world. Is that really the right thing to do?
This game has balls.
This is where Silver's character arc begins to properly kick off. Even though he still goes to Blaze for advice, he had begun thinking for himself, not blindly following what Mephiles says just for his future. This is the most pensive that we've seen him. They then travel to Eggman's base where they come across the blue Chaos Emerald. Blaze explains how it's a lucky charm that can turn your thoughts into power, and then they head off to meet with Mephiles. Silver begins to question Mephiles for the first time, tying into his newfound character growth and independence, and Mephiles, of course, dodges the questions and manipulates Silver into doing his bidding by dangling Silver's dream of a good future in his face like the crafty bastard that he is. And once again, Silver's body language here is indicative of his thoughts. He looks down as though he really doesn't want to do this, but feels as though he has to. He confronts Sonic, once again with the upper hand, but this time Shadow steps in and defeats Silver with one of the most satisfying kicks I've ever seen.
Ah!
Chaos control.
Oh yeah, can we get that one more time?
Chaos control.
Alright, just once more. Okay, I've had my fun. The two then travel to the past and are able to witness the origin of Iblis and Mephiles and how they are one and the same. Then Iblis is sealed into a lease by Father of the Year over here and is laid out by a tree, and this leads into a scene that perfectly showcases the sympathetic nature of Silver. Before he travels back to the past, he hears Elise mutter for her father in her unconsciousness. Silver can't help but feel for the princess who has no parents and can't allow herself to ever be emotionally vulnerable lest she release Iblis. This leads to him giving her the emerald that he found earlier with Blaze and tells her to think of it as a lucky charm. He shows some respect and mourning and then heads back through the portal. That is, unless you go through Shadow Story where Silver jumps into the portal with the emerald still in his hands. Yeah, you didn't think I'd catch that, did you? With the truth now known, Silver meets Sonic and tells him that he needs to rescue Elise, and I love Sonic's response to Silver here. He just kinda nods and runs past him with barely any surprise at Silver's change of character. This ain't Sonic's first rodeo of a rival who becomes an ally, and this once again shows off Silver's good heart. He has good intentions and wants to do what is right, and so he joins with Sonic. Anyways, Elise dies, the Sonic fandom cheers, and the three are seemingly distraught until Silver points out that they can just travel back in time to save Elise. Now, I have no idea why Silver doesn't just go to the past with Sonic to help ensure a good future, but I guess Silver is done fucking with the past because he heads to the future with Blaze. He defeats Iblis and then attempts to seal the creature within himself in similar vein to how it was sealed in Elise. This fails though, and then Blaze steps in, saying that she can seal it because she has a soul lit with flames that would be accepted. This leads into quite the emotionally charged scene, which dives into Silver's insecurity and kind nature, which brings us closer towards the climax of his character arc. Blaze asks Silver to use his powers to stop time and seal her into another dimension, but Silver can't bring himself to do it. He can't do that to his friend and states that he would be lost without her, circling back to that point I made earlier in the video about Silver's insecurity with isolation. Silver has always relied on others guiding him and giving him answers, but it was in this story where we see his character grow and he begins to question himself and others, but this was the full turning point. Blaze comments on Silver's naivete and then disappears. Somewhere. Supposedly dying, I guess. Leaving Silver on his own fully for the first time. With this, the clouds part and the future is saved, albeit in a very bittersweet fashion. Silver looks around, but he obviously isn't in the best of spirits. Like I said, Silver's a good person and was content with losing his own life for the sake of his world. He was more than willing, but what he wasn't ready for was the loss of his best friend. Then Sonic is killed, Solaris is reformed, and the universe goes to shit. The main cast meets in this distortion and they are all hopeless. They all think that the destruction of the universe is inevitable, and it really doesn't help that Sonic is dead. That is for all but one.
No, I won't give up. There has to be a way. If you say it exists in the past, present, and future, I'll destroy them all at once!
His optimism shines through here, and he comes up with a plan to bring Sonic back to life using the Chaos Emeralds, echoing what he learned about the emeralds from Blaze. This raises everybody's spirits, they go out and get the emeralds, Sonic is brought back to life in a very questionable fashion, and then the three go super to fight Solaris. I always liked the fact that Silver could tap into Chaos powers here and enter a super state. It drew parallels with others who went super like Sonic and Shadow, who are heroic characters, and by the end of this story, Silver becomes a hero. He has grown since the beginning of this game, completing his character arc. He becomes more mature and learns to stand on his own 2 feet, growing from his more oblivious, narrow-minded self to an optimistic inspiration with a sense of justice that was ultimately pivotal in saving the universe. And that pretty much covers Silver and Sonic 06. Now, I know that 06 is a very divisive game, but I will always defend the character of Silver here, especially to people who judge Silver based off of one boss fight. But Sonic 06 isn't the end for the titular hedgehog. He makes plenty more appearances, and we have some loose ends to tie up, so let's move on from 06 and talk about his appearances in the late 2000s and, of course, the 2010s.
No. Wait. Wait.
So as we know, Sonic 06 was essentially retconned, thanks to its ending that makes it so that the entire plot never happened. And after 06, he has a disappearing act, at least from the main games in the series. All of his appearances are relegated to spin-off titles where he's usually just an added bonus and not much more. I get the feeling that the writers had no idea what to do with the character. Repeating his character arc would have been seen as lazy, but then how would you attain the same character that was presented with the conclusion of this arc that happened in Sonic 06? The character could never be the same if the character arc never happened in the first place. It's kind of like Thanos in Endgame. That Thanos was there, sure, but he didn't hold a single candle to the Thanos in Infinity War, because this was a Thanos that didn't go through the events that the previous one did, making his character in Endgame fall pretty damn flat. But going back to Silver, his only more noticeable appearances pre-2010 are in the Sonic Rivals games, and even then, his inclusion feels a bit like an afterthought. I enjoyed that they played off the continuity of the franchise with 06 being retconned, and so Silver had no idea who anyone is, and the reverse is true. The problem though, is that his writing is pretty bare bones. I mean, it is a spin-off title for the PSP, so the story really wasn't going to be the main feature here, but I think a little more could have been done. As a character here, he's at best mediocre, but it doesn't go anywhere near his character or its associated arc in Sonic 06. I will say though, I did like the pairing of Espio and Silver. I thought that was pretty interesting. As it stands though, he feels kind of like Metal Sonic did in the Rivals games, and well, you guys already know my thoughts about that. It's not until 2011 that we get another mainline appearance, and he's just a boss fight. A pretty fun one, sure, but what was the point of him in the story again? Nothing. It was nothing. He doesn't appear again until the end of Generations, where he stands by the rest of the cast's side to inflate Sonic's ego with the power of friendship instead of, you know, fighting Eggman? God, this story fucking sucks. Other than that though, there isn't much to say, it's just a bunch more spin-offs. That is until his next main inclusion in the franchise, Sonic Forces, and Silver's inclusion here felt so secondary it hurts. It's as though he was just here to pad out the character roster for this shitty story. And you know what? Silver hasn't got many lines in this game, but the writers still managed to fuck it up with one line. Yes, you heard me, it took them all of one line to show that they clearly do not get Silver's character. That's gotta be some kind of record, right? Anyways, here's the line.
I'm an optimist, but I'm also a realist.
What? What the fuck?
What is that? What is that supposed to mean? Silver is as far as you can get from a realist. Right from his introduction, he was an optimist through and through before any kind of character arc occurred. So that should have carried right over to this game, regardless of the retcon at the end of 06. But no, apparently the writers couldn't even get that right. Literally all you have to do is glance at his Wikipedia page to get that. Silver had no reason to be here in the story, and it baffles me as to why he was included. Then there's Team Sonic Racing, which takes the character of Silver and just flanderizes it, taking his naive nature to new heights and making him seem like more of a goofball than anything else, seemingly following some of the more recent comics. I like that Silver does have a lack of social skills, as that would be expected considering he comes from a destroyed future where the only other person to talk to is Blaze. This is another similarity that can be drawn with Knuckles, with how he lacks social skills due to his isolation. But the difference between Silver and Knuckles is that Knuckles is more introverted while Silver is more extroverted. Silver likes being with others and has to learn to stand on his own 2 feet, whilst Knuckles enjoyed solitude and had to learn to work with others, which was a big part of his original character arc. But I think that this game just takes it a bit too far with its goofiness, just making it seem very out of place for his character. This is also similar in the IDW comics, but Silver there has been written pretty consistently throughout the whole thing. He does get serious from time to time, but honestly that just contrasts with the personality that we do know. I don't hate his character in the IDW comics, but I vastly prefer his character in 06. As for the Archie comics, well, I plan to have several videos dedicated to the characters from those at some point in the future, so prepare for that. But above everything, there's a pure narrative error with Silver past Sonic 06, and this is something that seemingly plagued Knuckles as well. Knuckles was always brought into the story because of his role as the Guardian of the Master Emerald, at least until the writers forgot about that, which is evident with pretty much every appearance past Adventure 2. That was probably because the writers would have to think of ways of including the Master Emeralds into each story to viably include Knuckles. And we do see a similar effect with Silver here. Silver is always going to be from the future, and so his appearance must tie into a reason for him to leave the future. But since 06 was retconned and he technically now has that good future, there's no real need for him to be here. And some of the reasons that have been given in certain games outside of 06 for him returning to the past can seem downright stupid. Like in Colors DS, for example, where he traveled back because he heard there was an amusement park? Okay, sure. Silver's reason for being in the franchise has always been that the future was fucked, so he had to come back to alter his future. But that seemingly isn't the case anymore. I can probably dive into a whole bunch of fan theories and how he can be written to change this issue, including my own personal theories, but honestly, that's another video in itself. Other than that though, that's it. Silver was a character who peaked in his debut game and really only went downhill from there. Honestly, and I know I'm gonna get some hate for this, I think I would have been okay with Silver not returning to the franchise after 06's inclusion, except for some spin-off games. I think that maybe he should have been left the hero of the story instead of a character that's been continued to be dragged along with no real purpose or reason to really be in the games right now. I wish that he could return to being a well-written character, and I would have loved to see him be fleshed out a little more and return to his status as the optimistic and inspiring hero. But as of now, it's no use. Well, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then be sure to leave a like, and if you really enjoyed it, then feel free to subscribe and maybe even visit the Patreon page if you're feeling a little generous. And speaking of which, special thanks to my Patreons for supporting this channel. Even the smallest amount goes a long way. Other than that though, I sincerely thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time.